All right, welcome back, everybody. For today's deep dive, we're taking a look at a listener request, a transcript from Level Up, Self-Improvement for Teens in 2024.
And even though it's targeted at teens, you know how we feel. There's usually something in these types of things for everyone, right?
Totally. And you guys know how much we love to unpack these sorts of things, so
Yeah, let's jump right in.
what really struck me early on was how much emphasis they put on self-improvement being even more important now than ever.
Oh, absolutely. And I think they really hit the nail on the head when they talk about all the unique challenges and opportunities facing young adults, specifically today.
It's like the rules of the game are constantly changing around us.
Yeah, and it's so easy to get swept up in the chaos. I mean, think about it. The constant connectivity, the sheer volume of information coming at us from all sides. It can feel like you're drowning sometimes. They really capture that sense of urgency, I think.
Yeah, and if we're not careful, we end up just reacting to everything instead of making conscious choices about who we want to be and where we want to go.
Exactly. It's not just about keeping up anymore. It's about consciously designing a life that aligns with our values and goals, right?
Okay, that's a great point. But
Mhm.
how do we actually do that? I mean, setting goals, even just thinking about it, sometimes that feels a little overwhelming to me.
Well, the podcast had an interesting suggestion. Did you catch that part?
Yeah, the whole start with where you want to be in 3 6 month thing.
Yeah, that's
3 to 6 months, that still feels kind of far off sometimes.
I hear you. It can feel daunting, right? But they gave that great example about reading, like, imagine just committing to 10 pages a day.
Oh, right. And just like that, this huge goal of becoming a better reader starts to feel way more doable.
Exactly. It's about breaking down those larger goals into those manageable steps because it's not about making this monumental leap overnight.
Right. It's those small, consistent actions that really add up over time.
Building that foundation brick by brick. Speaking of foundations, did you notice how much emphasis they put on habits?
Yeah, they call them the bedrock of self-improvement, right?
Right.
I mean, we could try all those life hacks and stuff, but at the end of the day, it comes down to those small actions, those little things we do every single day.
It's true. But here's what I find so fascinating about habits. They point out that we all have them whether we realize it or not. We're practically wired for routines.
It's like that saying, we are what we repeatedly do.
Exactly. So the question then becomes, are we in control of our habits or are they controlling us?
Right. Are our habits aligned with the goals we've set for ourselves? That's the million-dollar question. Which actually reminds me, they highlighted a few specific habits that they think are super valuable in this day and age.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
They talk about waking up earlier, which seems to be a common one. Exercise, journaling, and meditation also got some shout-outs. Pretty good mix.
Yeah. Some targeting physical well-being, others more on the mental and emotional side. What about you? Do any of those resonate with you? Or is there something else entirely that you think should be on that list?
You know, one thing that really stood out to me was their take on gamification.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They were really into using things like apps. They actually mentioned Habitica and Streaks specifically.
Interesting.
Yeah, like using those systems to build better habits, which at first I thought was kind of funny.
It does sound a little counterintuitive, right? Like gamifying self-improvement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then I remembered how hooked I got on that language learning app a while back.
Oh, totally.
Something about those little rewards and progress bars.
Right. It's like they're tapping into something primal. Makes you want to keep going, you know?
Exactly. It's like tricking your brain into enjoying the process.
Sure.
Right. But I think the bigger takeaway for me is that there isn't one right way to build habits.
Totally. We all have different things that motivate us.
Exactly. Some people are all about those visuals, the charts and graphs, and others need that external accountability. And that's okay.
It's about figuring out what works for you, right? Like what keeps you engaged, what helps you stay consistent.
Exactly. Okay, but so we've talked about setting goals and we've talked about building habits,
Right.
but what happens when things don't go according to plan? Because let's face it, failure is just a part of life.
Totally. It happens to all of us.
And I thought it was so refreshing how the podcast tackled this head on,
Yeah,
especially considering it's for teens, right?
absolutely. And they didn't shy away from it at all. In fact, they pretty much said that failure is essential for growth, which I love.
Yeah, like it's not something to be afraid of, it's something to learn from.
Exactly. And that really resonated with me because I think in today's world, especially with social media and everything, it's so easy to get caught up in this idea of perfection.
Oh, 100%.
Mm.
Always comparing ourselves, never feeling like we're quite good enough.
Right. But this podcast, they're like, no, failure is just part of the process. And they even gave that great question to ask yourself afterwards. What can I learn from this?
Oh, I love that. It's all about reframing those experiences, right? And instead of getting stuck in self-criticism, it's like, okay, what's the lesson here?
Yeah.
How can I grow from this?
Yes. It's that growth mindset we talk about all the time, turning those so-called failures into stepping stones.
Speaking of things that can be both good and bad, did you notice how much time they spend on social media?
Oh, yeah, they definitely went there. It makes sense, though, right? Especially for teens, it's such a huge part of their lives these days.
It's how they connect, how they stay informed, it's everything.
Exactly. But at the same time,
It's-
it can be such a double-edged sword.
So what's the solution? Because we all know it's not realistic to just swear off social media completely, right?
Right. It's all about finding that balance, isn't it? And they actually gave some pretty practical tips. Like, remember those apps we talked about earlier, Forest and Stay Free?
Yeah, for limiting screen time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they were recommending those, which makes a lot of sense. But then they also talked about being really intentional about who you follow.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like being mindful of the accounts you're letting influence your feed.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in that comparison game, right?
Totally. So instead of letting the algorithm decide what you see and how you feel, you're kind of taking back control.
It's like a digital detox, but for your mind.
Yeah.
I love that. So less scrolling, less comparing, and more connecting with people who light you up.
Exactly. And speaking of connecting, that actually brings us to their last big point, the importance of having a strong support system.
Oh, yeah. They were all about that. It's like no matter how much self-work you do, having those people in your corner is essential.
Absolutely. And what I thought was really interesting was that they didn't put any limits on what that support system could look like.
Right. Friends, family, mentors, even online communities. It's really about finding those spaces where you feel seen and supported, right?
Exactly. Those safe havens where you can be yourself, celebrate your wins, and get a little encouragement when you need it.
Because we all need that, right?
Okay.
Someone to cheer us on, but also to be there for us when we stumble.
It makes a world of difference. And it actually makes me think about this podcast, this community we've built here. We may be unpacking these ideas through the lens of this Level Up Self-Improvement for Teens in 2024 transcript.
Right.
But honestly, these themes, these desires to grow and become better versions of ourselves, they're universal, wouldn't you say?
100%. And that's what I find so fascinating about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We start with one thing, but it always seems to open up these bigger questions about life, about who we are and who we want to become.
Because, let's be honest, the journey never really ends, does it?
So true. Well, on that note, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious to know what's resonating with you. What's that one thing you're going to take with you from today's conversation?
For me, it's that reminder that we don't have to have it all figured out. Growth is a process, and it's okay to stumble along the way.
I love that. It's about being kind to ourselves, celebrating the small wins, and never giving up on that journey of self-discovery. So until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and remember, the power to level up is always within you.